John is so efficient that he prepares this season of programming so far in advance so that we can get everything, we can get all the speakers lined up and we can get the program brochure printed, that John probably sometime early last fall said, would you speak in the spring? And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he said, well, what would you like to talk about? Like, I don't know. Think of something for me, John. So he did. The Law of Karma Simplified? Really? Okay, so thank you, John, I think. Okay. I just thought you might like to know that this was, I don't think I would have said simplified, because I'm not sure that you can talk about karma in a simple manner at all. You know, when I was growing up, as John mentioned, I grew up in a Theosophical family. So when my family first started talking, or, you know, when I first started to grasp the concept of karma, I automatically thought that karma meant if I'm mean to my sister, and I have sisters, in my next life, my sister will be mean to me. So I didn't want to be mean to my sister because I don't want her to be mean to me in my next life. But as I continued to study and learn, I realized that karma is a little bit more like this. It doesn't really make any sense and nothing goes together and there are all these wires going every which way, but a little bit more beautifully, it kind of looks like this. Okay. Historically speaking, the concept of karma was introduced to the Western world, not the Eastern world, the Western world, by Helena Blavatsky and Colonel Henry Olcott, the founders, two of the co-founders of the Theosophical Society, in the late 1800s. Before that time, very few people in the Western world knew the term karma, much less what it meant. So in the last 144 years or 140 plus years, a lot has changed. Many people now, the term karma is known by many people, and most people have some vague understanding of it. We see memes and cartoons all the time about karma. I didn't actually copy any because a lot of them were inappropriate. So I took them or reworded them. Dear Karma, I have a list of people you missed. Don't you? I wanted to say this. Karma's just sharpening her nails and finishing her drink. She says she'll be with you shortly. I don't know why it's a she. I wish you could order karma like flowers and have it delivered. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? We hear karma referred to in lots of different terms. We hear it called the law of cause and effect, the law of action and reaction, a universal law, the law of harmony, the law of self-created destiny, and so on. It's on and on. There's so many perspectives on karma that we could probably start studying today and study on into what seems to me to be infinity, but certainly for numerous lifetimes. We could study forever. So to talk about karma in 45, 50 minutes is kind of an interesting thought. And also, to simplify it is also an interesting thought. We find information about karma in both the eastern part of the world as well as the western part of the world. We can find books, articles, talks, YouTubes, memes, cartoons, and on and on. We can find things that are very simple, very shallow, and we can find things that are very much in depth. We can find things that are very pragmatic, and we can find articles, talks, lectures, and so on that are very spiritual in content. And guess what? They're all kind of different. None of them really come together and say exactly the same thing. But there are a few things that many esotericists, I think, would agree with. Notice I don't say all, but many. One is that karma is a universal principle inherent in the universe. And we're going to talk about all these in the next few minutes. It's impersonal and inexorable. Every action has a reaction, and karma is inextricably linked to reincarnation. I think these are things that most students of the esoteric would agree with. So, before we go on to talk about this, I do have to say that I'm not sure we really have much of a grasp in understanding karma beyond those few points. We frequently talk about karma like we understand it, but I don't think that we really do. I think for some people, there's some sort of an innate, intuitive sort of understanding about karma, but it's just a tiny smidgen. In one of the classic Theosophical books, Light on the Path, there's an essay at the end of it written by Mabel Collins called On Karma. And in that, it's an essay on karma. In that essay, she tells us that the operations of karma cannot be fully understood until the disciple, that's us, has reached the point at which karma no longer affects us. Given this statement by Mabel Collins, we recognize that if she is accurate, and I have no reason to believe otherwise, that at this point in our spiritual evolution, we cannot grasp the entire concept. We can get hints, we can get intuitive glimpses of what it is. But it's very important for us to recognize that that intuitive glimpse, that edge, that little piece of the veil that we're lifting, is truly just a little piece of the veil and not the whole thing. But I do think that the four statements actually give us something to talk about and maybe can enhance our understanding just a little bit. The first one, karma is a universal principle inherent in the universe, has several implications. One is that there is an order to the universe. There is an order to the universe. There's some type of cosmic intelligence that has created a structure. Now, some people may call that cosmic intelligence God. Others may call it Parabrahm. Others, whatever, any name, it doesn't matter. But some cosmic intelligence has created this structure. And that things that happen are not random or chance or chaotic. There is a reason and a purpose. And if karma is a universal principle, then it's neither good nor bad, although we frequently talk about good karma or bad karma. It just is. It is a principle. It just is. Like gravity. Gravity is just a principle. It's not good or bad. It just is. Karma is impersonal and inexorable. Yikes. Sounds sort of ominous, doesn't it? But gravity is also impersonal and inexorable. And we don't think of that as being ominous. So karma really is not ominous either. It's impersonal because it's not influenced by feelings, attachments, or connections. It doesn't pick and choose who will be impacted. If I walk to the edge of this stage and accidentally tumble off, I'm just going to fall. And I'm falling not because gravity has chosen to pick on me, but because that's what happens with gravity. Karma is the same way. It's inexorable. It doesn't change. It's consistent and it's inevitable. Every time I walk to the edge of this stage and stumble off of it, the same thing is going to happen. Of course, that reminds me of the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. But the bottom line is that karma is impersonal, and it happens consistently. We have a tendency, I think, to blame karma when something bad happens that we don't like. I had a friend tell me one time, he was talking about someone he knew who'd had all sorts of tragedies happen in his life. And he said, boy, that guy must have been awful in his past life to have all that bad karma. Like, I don't think it really works like that. No, he must have been awful. I don't think so. When something bad happens, okay, if I'm walking along and I slip and fall and break my arm, I might have a tendency to say, I have such bad karma. I fell and broke my arm. But last winter, when it was so cold and icy, I was out walking my foster dog. He spends weekends with me occasionally, and we were out walking, and I hit a patch of ice, and boy, I hit the ground. Not once did it occur to me that I had bad gravity, okay? I just slipped and I fell. That's what happens. Okay? Not bad karma, not bad gravity. It just is. This is the third statement. For every action, there is a reaction. We know about Newton's third law of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I'm not a scientist. I'm a mental health practitioner. I can talk about mental health all day long, but you don't ever want me to talk about scientific principles. But we do know that is one of Newton's laws. I will, however, quote some things that H.P. Blavatsky, one of the co-founders of the Theosophical Society, said. She says, karma is the unerring law which adjusts effect to cause on the physical, mental, and spiritual planes of being. No cause remains without its due effect from greatest to least, from a cosmic disturbance down to the movement of your hand. Karma is that unseen and unknown law which adjusts wisely, intelligently, and equitably each effect to its cause. HPB tells us that karma is universal harmony. It's about balance in the universe. She uses the metaphor of a tree branch. If we take a tree branch and we bend it forcibly down and let go, we know what's going to happen, don't we? It's going to rebound. Okay? It's going to rebound. I'm guessing some people have done that. I'm guessing. All right. As theosophists, as students of the perennial wisdom, we know that our every thought, word, and action, behavior, causes a wave of energy. Right? It's all energy. Causes that wave. We also know that when we send that wave out, it's going to rebound back to us. It's a law of nature. This is the way in which the universe maintains equilibrium. For every cause, there will be an effect. And karma is inextricably linked to reincarnation. This takes us into a little bit of a different arena, a little bit different discussion. Theosophical literature talks about the spiritual evolution of the soul. It tells us that through a series of physical incarnations, lives, we continue to learn and grow spiritually until that point in time when we become fully human. Now, you may think, or just like I thought, well, I'm fully human. I mean, I'm fully human. Okay. But actually, I'm really not. I make mistakes as a human all the time. So my job here, not just here at Theosophical Society, but in this incarnation and in the next to come, is to learn how not to make mistakes as a human. And I don't mean mistakes like saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, but to learn to expand our consciousness so that we come to a place where we fully and totally realize the unity of all life, the unity of all beings. And at that point, and it takes a long time to get there, at that point, we have fully perfected being human. And that's the whole goal of this series of incarnations. A former president of the Theosophical Society, John Algeo, writes, "The purpose of our many lives is to further the evolutionary development of our minds and souls." So we're expanding our consciousness each life. That's our goal. That's our job. With the goal being to further this evolutionary development, to become fully human, so that we are recognizing the unity of all life. It just sounds so simple, doesn't it? It sounds so simple, hard to implement, but essential. So one of the ways, and from my perspective, the primary way in which we expand our consciousness involves some degree of pain or disruption, frequently referred to as bad karma. Looking back on our lives, we may ask ourselves, when have I learned and grown the most? Inevitably, the answer involves the passage through a difficult time, frequently a time of loss or tragedy. Look at that mama elephant pushing her baby. Yeah, it's probably scary for that baby to get into the water for the first time, to come down over those rocks. He's learning. Think about it for yourself. When have you learned the most in your life? Not that I necessarily want to repeat any of those times, but the difficult times are the times when I've learned the most, when I've grown the most, when my consciousness, I hate to say it, my consciousness has expanded because I don't know that that's really true, but when I seem to have when I seem to become more aware of the pain and suffering of others, when I've grown. So Blavatsky put it a different way. I was kind of surprised when I read this because it sounded much more modern than her language typically sounds. Having written in the late 1800s, her language is very different than the language we use today. This is a part of the quote. She talks about this growth through difficulty, saying, "The inner being, the soul, must continually burst through its confining shell or encasement," meaning the personality, this physical thing, the non-permanent aspect of our being. So the inner being must burst through this confining shell, and such a disruption must also be accompanied by pain, not physical, but mental and intellectual. And this is how it is in the course of our lives. The trouble that comes upon us is always the one we feel to be the hardest that could possibly happen. It is always the one thing we feel we cannot possibly bear. If we look at it from a wider viewpoint, we shall see that we are trying to burst through our shell at its one vulnerable point, that our growth, to be real growth, must progress evenly throughout. Just as the body of a child grows, not first the head and then a hand and then a leg, but in all directions at once, regularly and imperceptibly. Humanity's tendency is to cultivate each part separately neglecting the others in the meantime. Every crushing pain is caused by the expansion of some neglected part, which expansion is rendered more difficult by the effects of the cultivation bestowed elsewhere. In other words, our growth comes in the area which we have most neglected, the part of us which needs to be strengthened, and most likely the part of us that we don't want to touch, so that when something happens in that area, it's even more painful. And that's part, according to Blavatsky, and according to other teachers in the perennial wisdom, that's how we grow. That's how we grow. And we look at it as karma, and it may be. It may be karma. But I don't know about you, when I've been in that place of difficulty and pain, I'm not typically sitting around thinking, I wonder what this karma is all about. I'm thinking about, how do I get rid of this pain? How do I get rid of this pain? And we have choices. We do have choices. So let's put this in a bit more practical light. Let's talk about Joe. This is not really Joe. This is just a picture I found on the internet. But Joe is trimming large limbs from the trees in his yard using a chainsaw. He loses his balance and cuts his leg deeply. Does it matter if this incident is due to karma? Not really. It matters that Joe gets to the hospital to get the medical attention he needs to save his leg and possibly his life. That's what matters. To take this metaphor a step further, let's assume that Joe's life is saved, but the muscles in his leg are so badly damaged that he may never be able to use that leg again. And there we go to why. Isn't that what we do? We go to why. We may start to wonder, well, maybe in a previous lifetime, Joe was in combat and severed the legs of his enemies. So in this lifetime, he may lose the use of his leg. Or we may think, in his last lifetime or a previous lifetime, Joe took advantage of people who were physically challenged. And so this time, he's going to be physically challenged. Or we might think maybe Joe lacked compassion for individuals who struggled and treated them unkindly or maybe even viciously. We can wonder indefinitely, can't we? But does it matter? Does it matter? As human beings, we like to know things because it implies that we have some sort of control. If we understand things, and control always makes us feel safe. Okay? But we can't know. We don't know what happened. We don't know why this is happening to Joe. We just know that this is happening to Joe right now. Is it karmic? There's probably something in there. Yes, absolutely, because it's impacting his life. But does it matter why? It doesn't matter why any more than what I did when I was 5 years old matters now. It may impact me today, but so what? Which was actually what I kind of named this slide, and then it felt a little cold, so I changed it and thought why sounded better. For me, it seems like there are two important aspects of this situation with Joe. One is that he gets the medical attention that he needs, the physical therapy to possibly be able to use, or whatever is required to be able to use his leg again. But most importantly, what matters is how he responds to this situation. How he responds to this situation, that's what's critical. That's what's critical. And we know people who have been in very difficult situations, don't we? Who have chosen to work through it. work through the situation, to come through it. Now, I'm not suggesting that Joe doesn't have feelings that he's going to have to deal with about his leg or whatever may happen. He will. That's part of being a human being. That is a choice he gets to make. We know people who have chosen not to deal with their situation, don't we? People who have chosen to sort of be stagnant and slowly become maybe angry or even bitter because something happened to them. It is a choice. We don't know why Joe is in the situation he's in. We can wonder to infinity and may never know. And does it really matter? It only matters how Joe deals with it today. How Joe deals with it today. We've known people, all of us, in situations like this, and we've watched them respond in different ways. So, how will we respond to these situations when they come to us? Because they will. They already have, and probably more will come in the future, because that's part of being in incarnation, is difficulties come. Whether we attribute it to karma, which it very easily could be. I'm all in about that. Okay. But we will have to face them. And the question is not what we name it, not how much we understand about karma, but what the heck are we going to do about it? Knowledge about karma is not going to help us deal with the situation. And that's what's important. So we get to choose. Are we going to use it? Are we going to learn from it? Are we going to grow from it? I have to tell you, and this is probably a terrible admission on my part, but ever since I was little, I always thought that any bad thing that happened to me, karma, my karma, I was bound and determined to get through it so that I didn't have to repeat it. My sole purpose in getting through it was so I didn't have to do it again in another incarnation. Now, that may have been that simplistic way of looking at things, like if I'm mean to my sister, she'll be mean to me. But I was determined, not that I've always done it, but that's always kind of pushed me forward. And to me, I think that's what a knowledge of karma does, is pushes us forward to handle things in a way that is helpful to us and then ultimately helpful to all of humanity. I'm guessing you know this name, Viktor Frankl, the Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, created logotherapy. A man who was in a terrible situation, survived it and took his experiences and created something to help others. And these are his quotes. I'm going to go ahead and read them just in case. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And again, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Helen Keller, American author, activist, and lecturer who at the age of 2 contracted a disease or an illness that left her blind and deaf. She was one of the leading humanitarians of the 20th century. She said, "Character cannot be developed in ease and quiet. Only through experience of trial and suffering can the soul be strengthened, ambition inspired, and success achieved." Wilma Rudolph, Olympic sprinter who survived both scarlet fever and polio and was told she would never walk again. She earned 3 gold medals and broke 3 world records in the 1960 Summer Olympics. She was called the fastest woman in the world. And she said, after the scarlet fever and the whooping cough, I remember I started to get mad about it all. I went through the stage of asking myself, Wilma, What is this existence all about? Is it about being sick all the time? It can't be. So I started getting angry about things, fighting back in a new way with a vengeance. Cesar Chavez, American civil rights and farm labor leader, and a champion of militant, nonviolent social change. He and his family became migrant farm workers after losing their farm during the Depression. His formal education ended in the 8th grade. He says, "It is possible to become discouraged about the injustice we see everywhere. But God did not promise us that the world would be humane and just. He gives us the gift of life and allows us to choose the way we'll use our limited time on earth. It is an awesome opportunity." People who have faced difficulties, various difficulties, and who chose to work through those difficulties, learn, grow, and share with others. There's some people in the news today that we can look at. Bodie and Morgan Miller. I'm not sure if those names are familiar to you. Bodie Miller is an Olympic skier. He and his wife have several children. Their 19-month-old daughter drowned last summer in a neighbor's swimming pool. Since that time, they have spent enormous time working with the Academy of Pediatrics to get pediatricians to impress upon parents the importance of teaching very young children, to the age of 6 months even, water safety. Sophia Sanchez, I'm sure you've all seen her. You may not recognize her name. She's the 11-year-old little girl who received the heart transplant and is now on commercials on television talking about the importance of organ donation. Kurt Kay, I'm quite sure you've not heard of him. He is a friend of mine, a very dear friend, the husband of a woman that was more like a sister to me for 30 years. She was severely physically and sexually abused as a child, up to the age of 14. And she suffered the consequences of that abuse for her entire life. Kurt decided that something needed to be done. So in a very small town, our very small town, he organized people and created the Children's Advocacy Center, a place where, when there are allegations of abuse with children, physical, sexual, whatever, they can go there to a child-friendly environment, be interviewed by a trained forensic interviewer, and that interview is taped and can be used in court. And the children then receive counseling so that the cycle is stopped and doesn't continue. And I'm guessing if I went around this room, every one of you could talk about a hero, somebody that you know who has been through or has walked with someone through difficulties and has used their experience to help others. That, to me, is Karma Simplified. So let's pull it all together. We've looked at the 4 assertions regarding karma. We've looked at Joe's story. We've looked at the stories of others who have been through difficulties, what we would call bad karma, or who have experienced karma, as we all have. Karma is a paradox. On the one hand, we hear it's too complex for us to really grasp until we've become fully human. And on the other hand, it's so simple. It is so simple. It is working through. It is an inherent principle that exists. It just is. It's impersonal and inexorable. It just is, like gravity. There's no sense fighting it. Don't fight gravity, do we? Jump up and down. Maybe this time I won't come back down? No. We know that every action has a reaction, and that reaction often spans lifetimes, but we don't know. Someone said to me, well, what if this person was in the Holocaust and terrible things were done, but they survived, and so they learned some things. Well, in their next lifetime, how are they going to remember that? They do. We can go into a lot more depth in terms of the perennial wisdom about how that memory is maintained at the soul level. But it is at a soul level. That's how you got here tonight. This room does not have thousands of people in it. You are here because at some point in your journey, the interest started. The curiosity came. You have a knowledge already. It's in here, isn't it? There are some things that you just automatically do and wouldn't do differently because of memories from whatever may have happened in the past. The goal is to learn, to grow, to expand, to become more fully human, and in doing so, recognize the innate unity of all life. If we did that, can you imagine what the world would be like if everybody on this planet suddenly, just like that, I could just do that, right? Snap my fingers and everybody would suddenly recognize that we're all one. What would that change? It would change everything. And that's our goal. Here at the Theosophical Society, it's our goal when we study the perennial wisdom. It's to get to that place where it's soul deep. Okay. It's not where I'm looking at the people over here thinking, maybe I'll walk on this side of the street. It's the part of me that says, that's me over there. We make the choice to move forward or not. We get to choose. And I'm guessing that for me, certainly, and probably for you, that there were many lifetimes when I chose not to move forward. Which is why today I want to move forward, and I try hard to move forward. Don't always do it, but I'm sure there were plenty of times when I didn't. Does it matter? I don't think so. I love that I can just share my own perspectives. It seems to me that what matters is how we face what comes to us today. That is karma. Knowing that whatever we do today will rebound, so to speak, in the future. Now, I'm not suggesting we do good things so that we'll have good things happen to us later. I think intent and motivation may have something to do with that. But whatever we put out, we know is going to be out there in the future, because karma and reincarnation are inextricably linked. So what happens here, what happens now, how we deal with it, will be there. So just to end with a quote from Annie Besant, tremendous activist in the late 1800s and early 1900s. No soul that aspires can ever fail to rise. No heart that loves can ever be abandoned. I love that. Difficulties exist, only that in overcoming them, we may grow strong. And they who have suffered are able to save. Using what we've learned to help others. That's Karma Simplified.
There's someone who wrote in, how does divine forgiveness for those who have repented mesh with the concept of justice, which is associated with karma?
Let's see. Would you read it again for me, John?
How
Please?
does divine forgiveness for those who have repented, in quotation marks, mesh with the concept of justice, which is associated with karma?
Okay. So I can only share my own perspective because that's all I have. I have no extra wisdom that was handed to me when I walked into the president's office, although I was hoping that would happen, but no, it didn't. So all I can do is share what my perspective is. I'm going to change the word repentance into saying I'm sorry, being sorry for something. It may not mean quite the same thing as the writer meant. I think many times we do things that we're sorry for later and that we repent of or wish we hadn't done. But if we go back to these basic concepts, saying I'm sorry doesn't really change anything. When we put out an action, a thought, it's going to rebound no matter what, no matter how sorry we are or not. It's impersonal and inexorable. It's going to happen. I can step off the stage and be sorry I did it, but if I sprain my ankle doing it, my ankle's still going to be sprained. That's the consequence. So I think that there is divine, what's the word that he used, that person used, Harry? Divine? Forgiveness. What is there to forgive? It's like learning. You know, do we forgive a first grader because they can't do algebra? No. Forgiveness exists. Love exists. It's all part of that. But I don't think, what is there to forgive? It's a learning process. It's a growth process. And so, if I get down to go back to that example, simplistic example of if I'm mean to my sister, then my sister in my next life will be mean to me. If I'm mean to my sister when I'm 10, okay, which I probably was. I'm sorry if you're watching. I think she is. And I was. So if I'm mean to my sister when I'm 10, and when I'm 12, I'm really sorry about it, okay, at some point, I'm going to have to learn, though. I mean, I put out that meanness. And so somehow it's going to come back around from my perspective so that I can learn not to be mean when I'm 10, or mean to my sister, or mean to anybody.
With regard to past life regression, it is often said that once something is revealed in your consciousness about a past life, that oftentimes the karma, that term, bad karma, dissipates as a result of bringing it to the forefront. What do you have to say about that?
So once again, I'm going to start with I don't know. Okay. I have heard that same as well. So I don't know if, again, that it really does or not. I would go back to that whole concept that we talked about at the beginning where we're just lifting the veil and seeing just a little tiny piece here. So to make a statement that happens, I think is kind of questionable because I don't think we really understand it. But I will say that if there's past life regression and somebody remembers something that occurred that seems to be a learning experience now, okay, I would think that awareness of the learning experience would help the learning experience. Let's see. What's a better way to say that? So when I work with a client, a lot of times they may have stuff going on inside of them that they're not really aware of. But once they become aware of it, some emotional issue, some phobia, say, once they become aware of the root cause of that phobia, then it's easier to work through the phobia and get rid of it. Does that make sense? So whether it's something from a past life regression, some karmic incident, once the person has some awareness of it, maybe that's what helps them work through it, and the karma seems to dissipate, or at least what's happening now seems to dissipate.
But it can't automatically be lifted. It's not until you change your thoughts.
I would think, because that's the whole idea about balancing and harmony. You know, unless there's change here, you know, that's the whole idea of the change for growth.
Some of the literature that I've read about karma is what you do comes back to you. But some of it also is that karma feeds you what you need. And so we could say that in a past life I had a lot of money and I was selfish with that money, and I come back and I don't have any money and I struggle in this life. But it could just be that I had a lot of money and I was generous with it. But the flip side of the coin is you need to see what the other side of that is. So does that resonate with you?
That resonates with me as well. I don't think karma is always just about a punishment, which is what we think. I think karma is, again, impersonal and inexorable, but I also think it's about learning and growth. And so we are put in situations or given situations or we stumble on situations that we can learn from. And that the whole process is about learning. You know, it's so I'm going to equate this to parenting and children. Parents think about discipline as being punishment. You know, let me discipline my children, let me punish my children. The reality is, discipline is about learning. Just like we have disciplines in school, in college, there are different disciplines. Discipline is about learning. Karma, to me, is about learning. That's all it is. And it's helping me to learn what areas I have neglected and where I need to grow, where I need to burst forth, so to speak. And when I say I'm talking about the person looking through these eyes, not this physical personality, but what I need to grow to become fully human. So yeah, that's kind of that's my personal perspective.
Thank you, Barbara. That was enlightening. Just a comment. One of the things I've heard about karma that has helped me is that if you feel like someone has done you an injury, or if you feel, afflicted by someone, consider the possibility that this is a karmic debt that you owe. Mm-hmm. And I have found that very helpful. There's one issue in my life that comes up over and over, and it's just been very helpful to the first time I heard that, I kind of went, oh, it's one of those eye-opening aha moments, and so I was really glad to hear it. Yeah. So thank you for your input.
Thank you for sharing. And that's this whole process is all about learning together and sharing ideas together. Because none of us really know the whole thing. But together, hopefully, we can expand our perspective. You're much kinder than I, because instead of thinking that it was something that I was learning from a previous incarnation where I'd not acted appropriately, I thought, in your next lifetime, you're going to get it. Your karma's coming for you. I guess that's one of those memes.
This is just a comment that I believe Jesus the Christ preached and understood this law completely.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you.
My general understanding of law of karma is that how I react to the situation in this life is either unconscious reaction or conscious response. So which way I do it, I develop tendencies of either unconscious reaction or conscious response. If I carry that tendency, like you said, if I transform from unconscious reaction to conscious response, I'm growing.
Yes.
So that doesn't have a tendency of come back and haunt me. Mm-hmm. So like you said, if the growth process is happening, higher consciousness level, then we are working the law of karma in our favor. That's my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quite often, when you get into discussions having to do with reincarnation in particular, there is this philosophical context that is applied to it, a point system, in which case maturation of the soul requires reappearance, reincarnation as a growth issue, in which case if you grow within each of the reincarnations, you accumulate some credits toward the maturation of the soul to the point of final acceptance in terms of an evolutionary afterlife. How does the usual literature applying to karma and applying to reincarnation address that philosophical issue? Is there a lot of support for that? Is it something that is an automatic attachment in many circles having to do with karma?
So I'm not sure that I understand your question, so feel free to tell me if I'm not really going there. What I can respond to you with is what my reading and my understanding of the Theosophical literature. There's a great deal of literature all over the world about reincarnation and karma, and all of them are somewhat different, some very different, some slightly different. My understanding from a Theosophical perspective is, I've not heard the points system sort of thing before, so I might need to do some research or credits or...
Not necessarily points in the sense that there are there's a graphical connection of some sort. I use the word points only in the sense of a soul maturation to the point of goodness as opposed to negativeness. Thank
you. So my understanding is from my readings is that the soul comes into incarnation to learn and to grow, to mature. It's an evolutionary journey. And that process depends on the individual soul and their learning and their willingness to learn. And, there's so many components, once again, I think that go into it that we really don't have a true understanding of it. But the goal is to continue to grow and expand our conscious awareness in physical incarnation until the point where we do truly become fully human at the end of that period, and then go on to the next stage of evolution, which is kind of beyond our purview here tonight. So I'm not sure if that's sort of what you're talking about.
What would you define then as human maturation to the point of something?
Okay, so what you're asking is, what is this at the end, sort of the human, being totally human? I think it is, as Mabel Collins talked about, the person who has learned everything that needs to be learned through human incarnations and no longer has karma. The law of karma no longer impacts that particular soul because they've learned everything and they are truly 100% love, compassion, and understanding.